Hello and welcome to the after party. I'm No White Guilt, and with me, a man debonair nonpareil, the Great Order. Appearing on the honors roll call today is Disappointed Englishman, Laura, the Good Girl, Westward Thought, Trent, Saint McFreeman, Spartan Warrior Queen, Santa Claus, Ryan, Richard, Normal Style Crew, Omar, Lawrence, Keishi, Judson, John N, and Johnny, as well as Inquipper, David, our very own Dainty Brighton, Bob, and finally, Andrew. If I could give out halos, these and all of our investors would sparkle like virgin snow. I deeply appreciate your commitment and gilded characters. If you appreciate what I'm doing for white well-being, please consider becoming a monthly investor. The more I receive by way of your investments, the less time I have to spend at my day job, which of course means the more time I get to devote to white well-being. As for the Super Chat crown winner of last week, the crown goes to Quebec for investing a total of $50, returning again with the crown. Congratulations and thank you most humbly, Quebec. In second place, and returning again to second place, we have Luke, investing $24.99. Congratulations and thank you as well, good sir. Super Chat on YouTube or Streamlabs. The link is in the description. Jared and I, as you all know, evenly share the Super Chats with our guests. Before moving on, I want to thank everyone who has recently reached out to me with love and support. Since I began the Going Free live streams 2 weeks ago, I have received record numbers of messages, emails, direct messages, expressing support and loyalty to this cause of white well-being, and they seem to be increasing by the day. We are building something that is real, tangible, and spreading like the golden beams of dawn across our colorless landscape. Today might belong to the anti-whites, but tomorrow belongs to us. Now, one of the most exciting developments out of the white man's inventions is this ability to discuss and have conversations with people around planet Earth, something that a mere handful of years ago would have been thought impossible, almost futuresque-like, Star Trek-like. And yet today we do this on a regular basis. Jared and I have discussed interviews with people all around the world, from nearly all of the continents at this point. And we will continue to do so. We will continue to work hard for you all and bring you the message of white well-being around the world. And
we still have to get that interview from the secret base in Antarctica.
Exactly. We will get that interview. That will be coming soon. We're working on it. But we will continue to bring you these interviews from people around planet Earth, and we will continue to bring the message of white well-being to all our brothers and sisters, no matter where they are on this great and glorious planet of ours. And having said that, though, we have to deal with some eventualities and some challenges that are typically not problematic for those who have conversations on a more local basis. But our guest tonight, Mike, who was going to be joining us, is in the midst of a storm in the great country of Australia. So traditional Mike is in the middle of a blackout. There is no power where he is. He may, however, join us. So until he joins us, or if we have to reschedule, Jared and I are going to respond as we like to do and are wont to do when it comes to the needs and desires of the viewers of TAP and the other shows and videos that we put out, and that is respond to this demand for health and wellness discussion. And we are going to look to you all. And by the way, we also have this desire to hear more about male-female dynamics and relationships. So we're going to be discussing that as well. In the interim, we're going to look to you all. I think I'm going to bring Jared up in a second and get his 2 cents on this. But what I would like to first do is put a message or a question out to the chat, and that is, what have you all been doing to stay healthy? Are you in shape? Are you unhealthy? Are you sick? Do you want to lose weight? What kinds of programs have you tried in the past? Have you tried working out? And have you failed? Why have you failed? Have you tried diet programs? Which ones? Which ones worked? Which ones failed? If we are not physically healthy in this struggle for white well-being, we are not going to be able to carry our service to our greatest potential. And so our personal health, our immediate health, our ability to get up and start each day with great energy and enthusiasm, and respond to the challenges that we face with supreme alacrity. If we are not able to do that, we are not bringing the sort of power and potential to this struggle that we actually have within us. And that, again, is part of the process of going free. And we will talk more about that sort of thing on the Going Free live streams, so that we can release this inner spirit of Western civilization that is within all of us of Western kind, so that we can align with the spirit of Western kind and truly manifest our physical, mental, and spiritual potentials as great and glorious members of Western kind. I will remind you all that the greatest of our heroes, the greatest of our thinkers, the greatest of our painters and workers of all glory and goodness around planet Earth, that same blood, that same spirit flows through you. It is merely a matter of tapping into it, merely a matter of releasing yourself and freeing yourself, going free of those mean pathogens that are holding you back, mean pathogens that were specifically created to throttle you so that you could not truly realize your potential. It is this freeing of this great and glorious mighty spirit, a spirit that will make you 10 times what you believe you are capable, 10 times what you are today. It is the freeing of that spirit that will enable us to come together as a people, and in that dynamism of joined energies, truly bring great and good things to our people and recapture our destiny thereby. So I will now, with those questions, put out to the chat about health, wellness, and also questions about relationships. What kind of challenges have you faced? Have you found it hard to find a mate? Have you found it hard to go out on dates? Is it difficult when you are faced with dates that say or signal anti-white mean pathogens, for example, and how to handle those sorts of things? Have you had to endure that? And if so, please share that with us as well. And so I will now turn it over to one of our greatest in the cause, Jared George of the Great Order.
Thank you for that introduction. And yes, thank you for everyone being here. This is a time when we have to be flexible and nimble. As Jason said, we had a great show lined up with Traditional Mike from Australia. He passionately advocates for the cause in South Africa. So we were going to get a report on that, as well as his own home nation of Australia. Of course, that will be rescheduled, so we'll be hearing from Traditional Mike soon. But in the interim, we do enjoy having this ability, these kinds of streams where we speak directly to the audience. It brings on a different tone and a different tenor. So especially, as Jason was saying, with health, wellness, and relationships, all of those topics have been brought up a lot recently, and it's been requested that we address that. We know that this is impromptu, and maybe this isn't what you were expecting, but we know it's been on our audience's mind for a long time, and so this is now the time to start discussing these things. Health and wellness is something that we have alluded to a little bit about, but people for a long time now have been wanting to get a little more into Jason and I, both of our lifestyle and health practices, so we now have more time. Unless Mike surprises us and pops up, of course, we'll switch back to the South Africa thing if he can do that. So you have to stay flexible with us. But if things go as they are now, you can ask us about our lifestyles and what we do, what we eat, and how we take care of our bodies. And also relationships. We had the great stream with Josh Neal of No Apologies last week. And a lot of that was focused on male-female dynamics. There was so much energy in the chat. It was such a great episode. We had so much great feedback from it. So built up from that, and maybe even perhaps some of you have seen, and I'll put this in the chat when I'm done speaking. I just put out a video yesterday with a titillating image and title called "Don't Send Nudes." And it also speaks to the male-female dynamics and touches on the deeper aspirations we should have for our relationships. So all of these things have been building up. Your questions have been building up. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to have more of a chat with the audience. It's a bit of a more personal dynamic. These are really fun. Jason and I both enjoy this different kind of format where we're interacting a little more in real time with the audience, more of a conversation with the audience. So please do pin or tag Jason and I, one or both of us, in the chat so we can see the questions. Jason, please do let me know if we have questions, but if we don't, I guess we can get into our nutrition. Yes.
Yes. Well, let's start off with a couple of super chats right off the bat. We have Québécois, Foie Gras. The Bolsheviks came people, perhaps came for people, because of their beliefs and capabilities, not their actions. The alphabet agencies will too. Thank you very much. That was a $5 Canadian, I guess French Canadian super chat. Thank you for that, Québécois. We also have Josh Randall super chatting again. Thank you very much. $10 with the super chat. He writes, "Don't be stupid, be a smarty. Come and join the after party." Thank you very much for that, Josh. Well written indeed. So, do you want to? Let's see if we have any particular questions as of yet. I know one of the questions I saw the other day was about dairy, and perhaps if that person is in the chat, they can speak up. And the question that I had the other day that I believe was about dairy is dairy, yes or no? I mean, we have a lot of argument there that says that well, you know, whites have been drinking dairy for a very long time, and so it's become part of our normal diet. When it comes to me personally, I do not consume dairy. I have the ability to break dairy down, so I don't have a problem when it comes to that. My objection is to the hormones that are in dairy. We have also the question of what cattle, milking cows are really being fed these days. What are they being injected with? Is there a possibility that these casein and whey hormones that, of course, are meant for calves, is there a possibility that these hormones would be just fine for us to consume and were fine in the past, but now are what science refers to as tolerated? And that's something that I would ask everyone to consider when you are thinking about what you should and should not eat, is that should you eat something that the body tolerates? I know you've read this before and you've seen it before where they say, well, the body will tolerate this or the body will tolerate it well. Is that really what you want to be consuming? Something that the body tolerates rather than something that the body utilizes and passes through us, giving us energy, giving us strength, and in no way undermining, in no way needing to be tolerated by. So you hear the same sort of verbiage from the scientific community, nutritional community, when they talk about things like, in companies, of course, selling different foods. And this is something that we all have become more cognizant about, looking at the ingredients on packages. And you see, well, there's this little ingredient that if in 10 times this sum will cause seizures. And so they know that you're able to consume the chemical in that form or that quantity, and you'll tolerate it. You'll be okay. But what exactly does that mean? That means that you are being harmed by the chemical. You are being harmed by these things that they're putting in the food. And of course, that is a whole conversation about laissez-faire capitalism and a morality that puts the profit and the value of a dollar above the value of our people. So we should not have a system, no matter what that system is in the future. We should have a system that puts the health and well-being of our people, particularly our children, ahead of profit, ahead of the mighty dollar, ahead of the next the 17th mansion that the owner of the company is able to purchase as a result of driving down the cost by putting a little bit more poison in your system. So this is coming from rolling this back to the question of dairy. Would dairy be fine in a world where cattle were not given drugs to produce more milk? Cattle were not given drugs to produce milk earlier. They were not given drugs to produce more milk. They were not given drugs to produce milk later in life. They were fed other things to make them prime milk producers. Would this dairy, would this milk derived from cattle and goats as well, etc., would this be safe for us? Perhaps it would be safe for us. I don't know. We have to deal with what's before us, what our reality is. In all ways, we have to deal with our reality as it is. And the reality as it is that the milk that we are fed today is milk that a lobbying group for the dairy farmers came together, and you can do the research on this, you can do the history, and they all came together and lobbied the government of the United States to include milk in the food pyramid and the recommendations of what people should consume. Since that time, and who knows how healthy the cows were around that time, perhaps they were much healthier. Perhaps what they've done to them has been in recent time. But nonetheless, we see now that there is a lot of science coming out demonstrating that dairy is pernicious for the human animal. And so I cut out dairy years ago, and I can give you, and of course, this is all going to be anecdotal today, and it will be the same from you all. So thank you all for participating. I'm seeing a lot of people speak to this issue right now. And that is that when I gave up dairy, a lot of things changed about me in a positive way, health-wise. Skin got better, headaches got better, fewer to none. A lot of things changed. And as I say, and this is very important, because whenever anybody talks about dairy, they think that we're talking about lactose and lactose tolerance versus lactose intolerance. This is not about the sugar in dairy. That's what the lactose is. This is about the hormones in dairy. The hormones casein and the hormones whey. There are other hormones, but those are the two primary hormones. Those hormones are meant to drive calves from those little sickly little creatures, these little stick-legged creatures, into massive behemoths that weigh as much as your Subaru. Those hormones in the human body are, and perhaps genetically altered by the things that the cows are now given, are being identified by our immune systems as alien. And so we have many of these problematic. Some people, it becomes very problematic for them, and they become very ill as a result. And we see the immune system attacking people's bodies in a vigorous way. There are numerous types of blood tests. And I think, Jared, what we need to do for the future is, Jared and I have talked about doing shows, not just a theme for TAP, but shows specifically titled Health and Wellness. And I think when we do those shows in the future, what we have to do is we can bring some of this documentation. We can show some of this literature where it demonstrates the actual blood tests you all can go and get. You can ask your doctors for these blood tests. They will provide you with them. And you can see to what degree your body is identifying these agents in your system as alien and needing to be destroyed. The more of those agents that are in your body that the body identifies as needing to be destroyed, the more you will have these problems of the immune system attacking your own body. And the reason why is because the body, the immune system, can tell the difference between these different hormones, these different proteins in your blood, but not perfectly. So if they resemble close enough other proteins in your system, your own immune system will attack you. And that, of course, is called autoimmunity. So you end up with autoimmunity by way of your immune system identifying these hormones in the milk that is then passed into these proteins that are then passed into your system, and then misidentifying your healthy tissue for these same invaders, and then attacking the healthy tissue. Now, here's the thing that I haven't read about before, and I haven't seen anywhere before. but it is a suspicion of mine. And that is that your body uses, of course, these proteins to build its tissues. Are these tissues built out of these proteins also identified as invaders? So if you build a house out of bricks, and those bricks come from a particular quarry, is the house not then a manifestation of the quarry? Of course it is. So can we say then that the same holds true for the human body? I can't say for sure. If there are any physicians in the audience, please jump in and let us know, or any scientists who study this sort of thing. Perhaps this is an issue that we can get to in the future and discuss this, because this is very important. If the tissues, just think about this, folks, if the tissues that compose your eyeballs, the multifarious tissues that compose your eyeballs, if some or many or most of those are composed of proteins that the body has identified as invaders, will the body not then attack your vision, your very eyes, and blind you? Something to be explored. If it has not already, please tell me if there have been studies. I haven't seen them before. I can't study everything. So that is something that we need to discuss. But for me personally, I gave up dairy a few years ago. So that means no milk, no butter. At first it sounds horrible, but trust me, it's not. No ice cream. But increasingly, there are products being made out of almonds, out of coconut, that are not just tantamount in the quality of taste, but superior to the quality of taste, and they are healthier for you. They're better for you. Not only are they better for you in that they don't have these now what perhaps we can call them like tainted hormones or tainted protein, but they are healthier in the sense of your caloric intake and the like, and the fats that are natural that the body is able to use. There are many different, and we can't, Jared, we just have to also be careful on the stream. We can't say that we have remedies for anything, because as you know, there's a very powerful lobbying group in the country that will shut the show down right away if we say we have remedies for anything. We're not saying that. We're not claiming to be doctors. We are giving you our personal anecdote, just anecdotal evidence and personal things that we have read about here today. So yeah, keep the and we have some super chats. I'll assemble the super chats while Jared shares his thoughts with you on this. But as for me, I'm completely removed all dairy, and I can honestly tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that my health improved. As you know, folks, I am not a hyperbolic person. I'm not histrionic. I'm not going to say something just because it's wild. I'm a really, I guess, level-headed thinker. And so when I say that there was a noticeable change, it's not because I'm selling almond milk or something like this, or because I'm the kind of person who's given to trying to say wild things because it entertains myself somehow. No, it's because there was a noticeable change. And if you do the experiment yourself, remove milk in all of its forms from your diet, do it just for a week, and I think you'll be amazed. Things like sinus issues that people have, tonsil issues, glandular issues all around your throat, your neck, your armpits, your chest, things like a runny nose, postnasal drip, things like watering eyes, itchy eyes. A lot of things disappear for people. And not only that, but what is really important for us is clarity of thought. A lot of these pollutants in the body can cloud your thought. And if your thoughts are clouded, you're not going to be able to properly serve white well-being. So we need to be a healthy bunch of people. And that is one of the reasons why Jared and I are so very happy to talk with you all today about health, wellness, and relationships. So I'll pass it over to Jared.
Yes, make sure you do get your questions in about health, wellness, and relationships as well, because we had a lot of reaction about the male-female dynamics on recent material. So I know there's probably a lot of debate about milk and dairy. And there's a ton of other stuff I want to talk about and frankly have more experience with. I don't have a ton to add. Unlike Jason, I do consume some cow dairy, although not in abundance. I was never a kid that love to drink like tons of glasses of milk or anything like that. But I do eat. I have, if anyone in the audience knows, Kerrygold pure Irish butter, grass fed. That, you get something pure like that, or the rare occasion I'm visiting my parents and have some ice cream. I don't have much of a sweet tooth, so fortunately I don't have to really battle with that. But sometimes, a little bit of ice cream. I know I've gotten them on this whole kick too, that again, it's organic, often grass fed, which is going to be the same with meat. I guess we'll get to talk about meat in a little bit too. But the only thing I'll really add is, again, we're not doctors and we have to make that proclamation. This is just us talking with our audience, sharing our experience, things that have worked for us. But speaking very generally, I wholeheartedly agree with the main frame that Jason began with, and that's where everything focuses in for me, and that is do away with the artificial stuff and eat closer to the earth. Eat stuff that doesn't have preservatives in it, chemicals, added hormones. If you want to talk about how our ancestors ate, if you want to talk about not having things in your body that don't decompose, yeah, there's always going to be, I think in nutrition, there's always going to be debates. I mean, you can go crazy. Anyone in the audience you've gone on these internet search binges, I'm sure you can attest in the chat that if once you start researching nutrition, you are going down a rabbit hole, and it gets very overwhelming because you have people vehemently debating each other on one side of an issue versus another. People who are saying that, going vegan saved my life. And then you have channels devoted to people went vegan and they almost died, and they started eating meat and fish, and all of a sudden they came back to life. And it's very overwhelming, and you don't know where to go. You don't know who to believe. So you do have to listen to your own body. But that's a tricky thing too, because in the modern times that we live in, most of us, our bodies and our taste buds for that matter, have been perverted. So if you're an adult and you're just coming to this and you think to yourself, all right, well, I'm just going to listen to my body, your body has built up in it over a couple of decades the accumulation of these kinds of processed foods, chemical-laden foods, hormone-laden foods. So what you may be craving or what you may think is natural and feels good is really just the way that your biochemistry has gotten used to things, or even the microorganisms in your gut have gotten used to. Sometimes those sugar cravings, this is a whole weird thing too. Some of you may be familiar with. It's not really you craving the sugar. It's the microorganisms in your gut craving the sugar, and they're sending out chemicals to your brain to make you crave the sugar on their behalf. So there's all kinds of wild things with that too. But just to keep it focused on the milk dairy thing, I do like goat dairy, and I definitely recommend that. As I said, I do eat some butter, that grass-fed butter that I mentioned, and sometimes dairy products, and sometimes yogurt and things like that. As I mentioned, I've never really had a big craving for it, so it's not something that I've put a lot of time and thought into. Oh, I think I just got blurry for a second. I've experimented with times in my life. I've done a lot of experimenting with taking things out of my diet. I'm fairly disciplined in that way. And I want to talk about fasting as well too. So Jason, if you can remember, someone can make a note of that. I have some experience fasting and like to talk about that. That's not why I'm so thin though. I do eat, guys. A lot of people, they see that you're thin and they're like, oh, you don't eat. And I probably eat more than a lot of other people, but that's a bit of a different thing too. I have had periods where I was off of dairy. I don't remember it for me being totally different. So I'd like to get Jason, your take on how much of it is, if you have any ideas on this, is dairy in and of itself versus what you were saying about hormones and all sorts of other things, because you could say the same thing about meat. Now, I know you eat meat, I eat meat. Neither one of us is getting up here advocating for some kind of soy-based vegan diet. Obviously, that's not our thing. But you could say the same thing about meat. I pretty much don't eat meat out at restaurants unless it's like a farm to table restaurant or a specifically organic restaurant, because I know the quality of meat from Cisco or wherever that you're going to be getting. You're getting factory farm meat, and that's bad for a whole host of reasons. So you could make the same argument about meat with the hormones and the chemicals and everything else that you do about dairy. So I'm curious as to your take on that. And also, even though I said what I said a few moments ago about it's hard to trust your cravings, and that's why I mentioned fasting, I think you need to kind of cleanse yourself first. And this is something we can get more to. Reset yourself, and then, and after a certain amount of time, you can trust your cravings more. You could trust your body more because you've recalibrated, because you're cleaner, which I've done. So I am able to trust that a little bit more. But the issue of your own, there's no one size fits all when it comes to diet. And I know that there's some controversy about this, and I don't know how qualified this guy was, but I still see some things about the blood type diet. And for what it's worth, with my blood type, you actually are supposed to have a lot of protein, a lot of meat, some dairy and vegetables, low carb, kind of, I think they call it the hunter diet. And I do pretty well on that. So that's another whole thing too about it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. Even within a European population, there's some different blood types, there's some different genetic lines, and that may play into it as well.
Yeah, certainly there are a lot of ideas out there about how to, and we have some great questions in the chat, and I'm trying to catch up on all of those. Make sure that you tag both Jared and I with your questions when you have them, or with specific statements that you would like us to see, so that you will up the chances of one of us catching the your comment or question. But that, and the question about the meat, I guess, is what you're asking about. Isn't it essentially the same, right, Jared, as the dairy?
Well, England 14 said, to be honest, I never know what to believe. There's so much stuff and it all contradicts each other. Speaking to what I said in the beginning about all the different information out there, and I was writing a response as you were asking, but I might as well just read it here on air too. England 14, I agree. So to me, the main thing is keep it clean, keep it close to the earth, eat stuff that'll rot if you leave it out, cleanse yourself for a certain amount of time. And I know that's easy to just say, but we'll get into what that means later. Cleanse yourself. And then once you're more cleansed and recalibrated, then you can kind of listen to your body. But yes, what I was essentially saying is with the hormones and the additives, couldn't you say the same thing about like dairy and meat? It sounds like you have another reason for not eating dairy, even if you were eating grass-fed, organic. And I know there's a whole thing about raw milk too. That's a whole thing. I know there's controversy about it, although I haven't looked too into that.
Here's the thing. And this is what we need. Everything that I am trying to do, everything that Jared and I are trying to do, is to build this community of white well-being, to empower you all. We want you all to be stronger in all ways. Health-wise, we want you to be able to be empowered with the strongest dialectics, so that when you have your conversations with your friends and family, you win those conversations, and by doing so, you pass on. It becomes like a contagion of health, a contagion of wellness, so that when you have these conversations, they are then cured, and then they have the conversations. This will spread, ladies and gentlemen. That is what you need to understand. This is not another just another leafleting campaign or something like this. These are specific dialectics that are designed to overcome the mean pathogens with which you are infected. And once you are in the process of going free and you engage your friends and family, you will communicate those dialectics. And just in the same way that they talk about memes being analogous to a cold or a flu that is passed by contact, in that exact same manner is how I developed these over years, ladies and gentlemen. So the purpose is so that you will go out, that you won't need no white guilt. You won't need the great order. So that you guys, by learning from us, will then take these messages, you will go free, and then you will come in contact with those in your spheres of influence. And when you do, you will spread those salubrious infections, if you will, those salubrious contagions, if you will, and they will spread from one white person to the next, to the next, to the next, and it will be a rapid spreading. I predict that it will be analogous to the spread of Islam through the Middle East. Islam spread through the Middle East by way of the sword. We will spread with as much rapidity through the white population by way of these salubrious contagions, these ideas that undermine everything that the anti-whites have built up to control you. Salubrious means healthful, beneficial, wholesome, and the like. So when it comes to, and just so having said that, it is Jared and I, our objective to make you as strong as possible. You're coming into our gym, our dojo. You're coming into our gymnasium to be worked out, to be prepared for the life that is out there for you. Not just the life of your interactions, but also even economically. If you understand what really motivates people, what's really going on around you, and you already see this to a little degree happening in markets. People already understand that as anti-whites come to control a company, they begin selling their stock in that company because they know that unless the company is too big to absorb the losses, like say an Amazon or something, unless the company is too big to absorb the massive losses of putting anti-white ideology before profits, that in short order, that company's value will be heading south. So if you understand that, you will also be able to make better economic decisions in your life. There is no area of your life that cannot be improved by the kinds of things that we share here on tap, that are shared in my book, Born Guilty and Go Free. So if you haven't looked into those, please do so. So back to the eating. Yes, if you're going to eat meat, or you're going to eat dairy or these sorts of things, obviously get them from the most natural source that you can possibly get them. And don't just think about the cow today. Think about the generations that it has come from. You don't want a cow that is eating grass-fed and all of it, and he's living a beautiful life, but he is from a generation of 20 of ancestors that were injected with poisons, altering their DNA and whatever else have you. So this can be kind of a difficult thing to do. So what I do is and I'll just say this also. This is the first thing that's really important, because we have to break this down. And people have said this, and I'm seeing it in the chat, that there are so many different conflicting studies. There are so many different conflicting prescriptions about how to move forward. Here is how you move forward through this maze and through this mess. Simplicity is the best course. And that simplicity in the program that you follow, simplicity in the specific diet and the application. So the most important thing in your diet, and this is the biggest tip, the absolute biggest tip that you will receive in your life when it comes to what you eat and being healthy, and that is, it is far more important, vastly more important, that you stay away from things that are harmful to you than it is that you consume things that are good for you. Does that make sense? You want to stay away from things that harm you far more so than you want to consume things that are good for you. The body can go for a very long time on very low levels of minerals and vitamins and the like, and be very healthy. We hear a lot of these stories about like these nuns in Ireland that lived until they were 120 years old, and all they had were like potatoes and this little bit of this and a little bit of that. They didn't have this rainbow of fruits and vegetables that we now are told to purchase to be healthy and all of this other sort of stuff. It was very simple. And why were they living so long? Why were they without illness during that time frame? Why were they lucid up until their very final minutes in their deathbed? The reason why was because they had not poisoned themselves with a lifetime of little bits of poison every single day, little bit more of poison, a little bit more of poison. So that's the first thing. Stay away from the things that are harmful for you, the things that will undermine your health. And that can be sometimes confusing, but most of the time these days, it's very easy to find the information you need to ascertain whether a particular substance or food or what have you is deleterious. The next thing to do is so I'm just going to give you two things right now so that it'll be easy to grab and move with and employ in your life. And that is, simply ask yourself, if the human animal was wild, if it was not living in civilization, if you didn't have a grocery store on every street corner, if you didn't have the ability to easily grow whatever substances you want, if we were just wild animals, what kind of things would we consume? What kind of things could we? And then, folks, hold on. After I finish this, we're going to get right into, because it looks like that Mike has joined us. So let me just finish this thought. And then we will move right into the show as planned, which is fantastic. So let me say then that you hear a lot of things and I about herbs and these sorts. And I'm not saying that they all don't work or do work or what have you, but different. Jared made a great point about different bodies respond differently to different substances. So an herb that works well for one person and say takes care of their headaches may give another person a horrific reaction. Herbs are not something that, if we are wild animals roaming the plains, that we're going to be consuming in great quantity. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you would eat bark off of a tree if you were in a starvation scenario. So when it comes to things like herbs, be very careful. Be very wary of these charlatans that will tell you that the Bamdeeptu tribe and whatever has said for generations that whatever herb does X, Y, or Z for them. Would you take any other advice from the Bamdeeptu tribe? I mean, when you look at that tribe, does anything else in their appearance and their accomplishments and what they do, is anything else there something that you would follow, and certainly something that you would put in your mouth on a regular basis, some sort of substance that you would put in your mouth on a regular basis? If they are not, then you should stay the heck away from what they are trying to push on you by way of the claims of the Bamdeeptu tribe. And of course, I don't need to tell you all, you're a smart bunch, that those tribes are not really making any of these statements. You have very clever marketers who know you're never going to speak to that tribe, and you're never going to get in to interview them and find out whether or not it's been something passed down for generations. So instead, stay away from crazy claims. You know, the next, in the name of white well-being, the next time you hear a claim in a magazine or on the television that the whatever herb will make you taller or make you have a greater sex drive or do X, Y, or Z, don't give these people your money. It is charlatanism. These people are mountebanks. They are fleecing you. At worst, at best, you're going to take these substances and nothing will happen. And at worst, something bad will happen. You'll end up having to get on a cortical steroid to counteract the reaction or something of this nature. And you'll also be putting your money someplace that it's not doing you or our people any good, but it is filling the gas tank on the Maserati of the guy who owns the company that just sold you that quackery. So having said that, I am going to point out that we have now had join us Traditional Mike from the YouTube channel of the same name. And I'm going to go ahead and bring him in with what I have here, the way I would have if we had the opportunity to start the show. Mike hails from the land of many pouches, the great land of Australia. And he has been in the movement for traditionalism and white well-being for a number of years, collaborating with many others in his efforts. He is particularly passionate about the cause of our people in South Africa and has used his social media connections to raise awareness of their persecution and horrific suffering. Currently, he is collecting and curating his experiences in the hope of transmuting those writings into a book that he hopes will serve as a vehicle to inform the world about the beautiful and monstrously extinguished life of Kayla Meyer, a beautiful 9-year-old little girl for whom we wore purple recently, her favorite color. Now, before I turn it over to Jared, I want to say that Mike has been a real great friend to me behind the scenes over the past year and some now. He's a kind man with a heart so replete with love that I don't know how there's any space for blood in there. I don't know how he makes it through a day. So anyhow, with great pleasure, we invite Mike to tap, and I now turn it over to Jared to do the honors.
The blood is love, and the love is blood. Mike, welcome to the show from Australia. I give you a heartfelt welcome to the after party. Thank you for joining us. We were talking with our audience just a little bit about health and wellness before you showed up, but we told them that you would hopefully be joining, and here you are. So we want to get right into it. After you give any introduction or anything you'd like to say, we want to hear first about, now you're in Australia, we may speak a little about that, but you've done so much work about South Africa, and that's the main topic of our talk today. I just want to hear you set the table about what this cause means to you, why it called out to you personally, and then we'll talk a little bit more about why whites around the globe in general should be tuned into it. Maybe there's some overlap there too, but just personally, why did this call out to you? What is your story that led you to be an advocate for South Africa?
Thank you, Jared and Jason, both for the gracious invitation to come upon your excellent program. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Apologies for the slight delay in arrival. There was a couple of technical issues, but we managed to overcome those. For me, it was just over a year ago now. I became aware of the issues facing the white people in South Africa through a mutual friend of some of us, Ayla, Wife with a Purpose. I was doing some background work for her behind the scenes and saw an interview she did on that issue. And then a little while later, we had the Home Affairs Minister and the Immigration Minister of Australia start making some public noise about wanting to assist the farmers over there, which gained my attention. And then I started looking deeper into the issue, and that's when, I guess, the Pandora's box was opened, if you want to call it that. And I started making some noise on Twitter, and then that led a few people to start following me from South Africa. And one of those was a person who had a little girl as her profile picture. And I followed that news story, and that turned out to be the story of Kayla. And that is what fired my passion when I found out what happened to Kayla, and the lack of media attention that received, and the lack of media attention a lot of the issues facing our white brothers and sisters in South Africa face. It horrified me that all this was going on the other side of the Indian Ocean from where I am, and very little is said. And I thought, this has to change. Someone has to pick up the baton and be a voice for these people. So that's how in a nutshell, how I basically started.
And just to give context, how do you conceive of the connection among people of European descent around the world? What do you say to someone that feels maybe they don't live in South Africa and it feels very foreign to them? It's over there. It's not something in their day-to-day lives. What unites us as Europeans?
Well, to start with, a common heritage, a common ancestry. We are all of the same ilk, all the same blood, whether we're in America, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. We're all of the same descent. So we are all connected deeply through that. But because of the modern world I feel that we live in, a lot of issues feel more distant because we've got so much of an information flow coming through to our streams, our news feeds or whatever. Some things get more attention than others, and I feel that South Africa just wasn't getting the attention it deserved because the same thing happened in what used to be Rhodesia, Zimbabwe as it's now called, with the white people there. They then fled to South Africa. Now they're facing the same thing down there. But it's I think Europe itself has a lot of its own challenges, which I think distracts from the issues that South Africa is facing in terms of the European people. But I feel that the issue is growing in notoriety over in Europe. It most certainly has gained a lot of attention over the past year that I've known.
And one more general question. Of course, we're going to get into some more specifics, but a general question, and then Jason will catch us up on some super chats. Being that we do need to feel more solidarity around the world for our common ancestry, as you said. This is a show, of course, where people from all around the world do tune in. We have that great pleasure. Of course, we're speaking to you in Australia from the States right now. But what are some main things that you want people of European descent around the world to know about what is going on right now in South Africa?
Well, there are several issues that are facing the people there. Obviously, the most prominent one in people's minds would be the farm attacks and the farm murders that occur on a daily basis. There's reports of attacks every day. Regretfully, some of those do become murders, and that's probably one of the biggest situations facing them. There's also the land expropriation without compensation issue, where the government is attempting to take land from white farmers without paying them any money for the land. And that's another of the major issues, as well as poverty. About 10 years ago now, we had the GFC that hit, and South Africa has a policy called the Black Economic Empowerment Policy, whereby white people are not held in the same esteem in certain categories of employment, which means they are less likely to find work, and they end up in this squatter camps across the country, and they end up in those camps where they have no electricity, barely any running water, very little amenities, and they're forced to live in those camps. Lauren Southern, in her Farmlands documentary, highlighted those camps as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out to people that they are, population-wise, a minority there.
They are, yes.
So you mean to tell me once you become a minority and you're white, you don't magically get all the government programs?
Yes, they are most certainly a minority. They make up approximately 8% of the population in South Africa. And they are not getting the assistance. They are forced to do everything off their own back. They don't get the backing and the help. They have to fend for themselves effectively. And cost of living is so high in South Africa. I know a couple who have no children, and they both work, and they have enough to get by on. They don't have anything to, go on a holiday all the time or enjoy life. They have enough to get by on their 2 full-time jobs.
And according to the gentleman at Boer Republic, who we spoke to, Jason and I, on another program back in October, this week on the alt-right, and had a great interview with Millennial Woes on Millennial. I definitely recommend people check out. It's a very telling kind of an interview. It's something for us in the States to remember, and perhaps you in Australia, you could fill us in a little bit more about Australia later. We just had our State of the Union here for President Trump. We see the changing tone and character of our own government, and we see where this is going. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just gave a speech saying that Latina people here are native people, and that they're on native land. And this is the trajectory that things are going in. And if you think that white people are going to get treated in a different way once they're a numerical minority, think again. This is the kind of thing that we need to send to people. That interview with Millennial Woes and Boer Republic is something that I would say, send to your parents, send to people a little older who might not get it, to see the direction things are going in. They're being, the white 8%, as you said, of the population is still being taxed the most. So no matter where you go, Australia, South Africa, Europe, United States. We'll talk about this in detail a little bit later, but the same patterns are there. The writing is on the wall everywhere. But having said that, Jason, I'm curious if you have any super chats for us.
We sure do. The first thing I want to say to people is that this is, and you can see this in the weight of Mike's words. This is an absolutely grave subject, and there are lessons to learn. There are actions we need to take to save our brothers and sisters, as many of them as we possibly can in South Africa. There are actions that we can take here at home, actions that we can take abroad. We need to be contemplating these things. We also need to learn from what happened and in South Africa, in Rhodesia. And I think one of the biggest lessons to learn, and then I'll get to these fantastic super chats. And I also want to thank you all for giving your little bits, everyone in the chat who gave a little bit of information about the subjects we were discussing health-wise. And Jared and I will be revisiting that in specific streams. I'd like to have Mark Collette come on with us as well, as he is a health fanatic. And so we'll do that for you all and make sure that you all are empowered with that information. So, and thank you all for sharing your great insights. I saw a couple people in there. I think I saw Jennifer's actually said she's an herbalist, and I will be speaking with her later on about what she knows and what she does there. Perhaps there can be stuff, the different substances that we can bring forward or mention for our audience. But I think one of the biggest lessons that we have to take away from what happened and is happening to our brothers and sisters in South Africa is this. Despite the fact that as individuals, they have the will to survive, as a person, it is superior and more desirable to be alive than it is to be dead. That's a question that doesn't need to be answered. It doesn't need to be asked because it is just so obvious. And yet, despite the fact that they want to be alive, despite the fact that they want to protect their loved ones and ensure their life and the happiness, etc. Surely this little girl, her family would have liked to have done, Kayla's family would have done anything they could to have ensured her a long and fruitful, beautiful life, a life with friends and enemies, a life with ups and downs, boyfriends, an engagement, a wedding, the dance with her father, a first child, grandchildren for her parents. That was all robbed from these people. And they wanted that reality more than anything in the world. But something was lacking in their lives to enable them to come together as a united force against the anti-white ideology that was consuming and is consuming that nation. They had no rallying point. They had no authority, no ideology, no religion that spoke to them, to which they yielded, to which they listened, to which they lent credence, to which they acted as a united whole, as a body insurmountable in their genius and strength. So being widely dispersed, despite their desire to live and have these wonderful moments in their lives, despite that desire to live, in their individuality, they have been eaten alive. So it is this faith, it is this allegiance to a single entity that speaks to us all with a single voice that will empower us. That is what was lacking in Rhodesia. That is what is lacking in South Africa. And it is what is currently lacking in the rest of the West. That is what we need to be building. That is what we are building. Because, to use a line from a movie, as God is my witness, we are going to stop more Kaylas from happening. we are going to have more little girls and little boys come to the fruition of their lives by our acts, by our sacrifices of courage, by our standing up to this system of anti-white ideology. So I ask you all, actually, if we could just briefly take a few moments of silence and quiet the chat for Kayla and her family and all of our people, our brothers and sisters in every Western nation who have had their lives snuffed out by anti-white monsters. Thank you. Now let's get to some of these great super chats. Phoenix Fire, a glorious woman indeed. Super chatting with $10. Thank you very much. The plight of the Boer is one tragedy that shatters my heart every single day. If I could, I would sponsor thousands of them to come here. Everyone, please do everything that you can to save our brothers and sisters down there. Amen to you, Phoenix Fire. Thank God that we have you and other sisters like you in our cause for white well-being. We have a super chat from DB Cooper. Even after he pulled off the amazing stunt of parachuting out of the back of an airplane in, what was that, the 70s, I think it happened. Still kicking around with $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Mr. Cooper. I saw a comic book strip about why we never heard what happened to him many years ago. In fact, when I was a child. And in the comic, it said the unknown conclusion to DB Cooper, and it showed him paratrooping into a kennel of Rottweilers, and that's why we never saw him again. We have Virtuous Straight super chatting with $20 Canadian. Thank you, Jason and Jared, for sharing your knowledge with us, making personal sacrifice for the good of the folk. Great work on the Uberfolk song, This Death. Thank you very much for that, Virtuous Straight. I had the easiest part. Bill donated $5 super chat. Thank you very much. I have a book and I'd like to promote. It's pro-white fiction called Red Pilled. Any suggestions? Bill, get out there. You know, it's going to take your effort of pushing it everywhere you go. So energy, enthusiasm, dedication, make it happen every day, and you will get it out to the masses. Message boards, things like this, super chatting, and keep at it. You'll make it happen. Johnny Jones donated $10 through super chat. Watch Communism by the Back Door. I guess that might be a video. Cyrus donating $10 through super chat. Thank you very much. The left will defeat Islam. Majority of Muslims in the U.S. support the LGBT movement. Pew Research. Their children are subject to the same brainwashing as everyone else in the West. Globo homo tames all. Maybe so. I guess we will see. Thank you very much for that super chat and the intel. Syrup, again, doing double duty. And I have to admit, when I checked off and signed off the other day on my Going Free live stream, I forgot to thank all of my moderators, and I will thank them for that time on the air. I will thank them again for now. Thank you all at the end of this show, but I apologize for missing that. It is a difficult job to do the moderation, and you all are doing it just out of the goodwill of your heart. We thank you for being here. Thank you for that. Super chatting with £5. Jason, since you are sugar and dairy free, do you have an extremely low body fat percentage? I too eat this kind of diet and have only around 7%. Very impressive, Syrup. And I too have an extremely low body fat, higher than yours though, about 13%. But you can see the muscle striations on my body when I just moving. You'll see the striations moving under the skin. Taylor Garza, another great member of our community, super chatting with $4.99, writes, the left aware that they will eventually come, are the left aware that they will eventually come into conflict with Islam? If so, whose ideology will win in the end? Well, ultimately, the ideology will win that has the greatest force and the greatest power and the greatest dedication. And so that is a message, a question put out to all of you in the chat. about which side has the greater dedication and the greater finance and power behind it. Hubert, super chatting with $5 through Super Chat. Thank you very much. A good alternative to cow milk is goat milk. It's easier to digest and much better for you. I've heard that, and I have never tried goat milk, if you can believe it. But I've had a lot of friends that tried goat milk, and they said that it went with their body much better than cow's milk. Arya writing, what is your opinion on testosterone replacement therapy? Studies show men today have 1/2 the testosterone men had in the 1940s. Well, this can be something that Jared and I, and perhaps when we have Mark on, can discuss, because at points you have pharmaceutical companies that are attempting to sell you with some tricky verbiage. Really what matters is the testosterone that is free flowing in your bloodstream. That's really what's under consideration. If that's low, and there's also some other things to consider about testosterone has also caused these testosterone injections have caused a lot of cancer. So there's a question there of whether or not the natural decrease is following a natural curve otherwise seen in your body. It may be that your testosterone is lower than, say, the men in the 40s, but so is a number of other compounds and components in your body. And so just altering one might be more harmful than beneficial. Richard, looks like we have a question from Richard, not a super chat, but we do have another super chat. Richard writes, how do I selectively rid myself of racism against white men? Well, I don't know, because we don't use the word racist here. We don't use the words of anti-white oppression. If you want to free them of anti-white ideology, you can watch these streams. You can read Go Free. You can read Born Guilty. There are a great many suggestions in those. And finally, and we will then get back to Mike to hear, Mike is doing, and if you do not follow Mike, his links are in the description. You absolutely must follow him on Twitter. You must retweet the tweets that he makes, because this is the information that we need to reach the white population around and across around the world. Powerful stuff that needs to be heard, because this is the kind of truth that will break through to the masses. This is the kind of truth and also the questions that they will be caused to ask when they say to themselves, why hasn't the normal news told me about what's happening to these white people down? And there, folks, that's when you see a little bit more of their believability that is dwindled from these entities. That's when you see these white people pull a little bit back, pull a little bit further away with their loyalty and their respect to these anti-white entities. They become disenchanted, and they begin looking elsewhere to people like us for the truth. So it looks like we have Ark Sampson with super chatting $9.99. Thank you for spreading the message of truth and tradition. Character is fundamental. I could not have said that better myself. Beautifully done. Thank you very much. I believe that's it, Jared. We'll pass it back over to you so we can get back to Mike with this absolutely essential information.
Yeah, Mike, I want to thank you for making the Kayla Meyer memorial page. I put it in the chat, and our moderators can keep putting the links there. I had to walk away from the computer a couple times when I was reading that. I watched your video when you were explaining it, but it didn't go into all of the details about what happened to her. And it's not easy. It's not easy to read that and listen to that. And I'm glad Jason gave us that moment of silence. But sometimes people need to hear the exact details of what is going on, and you need to hone in on a personal story. So I'll give you the floor to speak however long you need to about the work you're doing with her particular story and the story of her family, and why that is something to rally around.
Thank you, Jared and Jason. Yes, it was very early in my piece working with the work with the white South African cause that I came across Kayla's story, and it absolutely horrified me, the story itself, and also the fact that there was no coverage of it. There was a couple of news articles from South Africa, and there was nothing from your mainstream media outlets over in the Western world. So that's when I decided that something had to be done, and that's when I created the Facebook page that Jared has so kindly mentioned. It is a very personal story for me, and I've come to know a lot about it, a lot more than I would probably share, because some of it has been shared in confidence. But I created the page on Facebook, and I did a little promotion on it to get it some attention internationally, and it took off. It went like a wildfire. Likes, comments, all these things started happening. And then something happened that I wouldn't think would be impossible, but I thought could possibly happen, but I never expected it. The page received a message from someone asking who created the page. So after finishing my day at work, I got home and I sent a reply explaining who I was, where I was from, why I did what I did. And the person replied with that they were a relative of Kayla and her mum, Marie. I had found the extended family, and I have come to know them very well as well. They are very dear friends of mine. I speak to them on a daily basis. And they have told me a lot about Kayla's life, which will be the basis of the writing that I plan to do. And they were not overly well-off people, Kayla and her mum and the family. Marie was engaged to be married to a gentleman by the name of Kenny McCormick. His dad, Monty, owned a small holding of land near Centurion, which is not too far from Pretoria, the capital. And they were building a house there together and had a very happy little life. Which unfortunately on the morning of the 10th of March in 2016 was absolutely shattered. From what I have been able to ascertain, Marie and Kenny were at the construction house, which was just away from where they were staying, looking at the house or doing some work on it, I'm not sure. And Monty, effectively the granddad, was making Kayla a snack before bed, a couple of sandwiches. And that's when the attack took place. There is a striking photo online which you can find of the kitchen bench. There is buttered bread sitting there, jars open of jam or whatever might be the case, and it's just sat there. Obviously, when they've come in to investigate the crime scene, it's still there. They didn't even get to make their sandwiches when the attack happened. It was literally that sudden. From what I understand, Monty attempted to protect Kayla and told her to hide. She eventually would have gone to her bedroom first, I would assume, because that's where a little child finds their safe place, as we all did as children. There is a photo of blood on the walls in Kayla's room. It's not Kayla's. From my understanding, it's Monty's, as he was trying to protect her and shield her. They eventually found Kayla's body in the storeroom, or the shed as we would call it, where she had put up some kind of struggle to keep her life, which was taken away from her by another attacker who found her. They then moved to the house under construction, where my understanding is Marie was next. And then Kenny was the last. They actually took him away from the house that was being built, probably tortured him, as he would have been the last alive, and they found his body some distance away from the property further away. That's what I have been able to piece together on that particular story. And when I found the story, I was absolutely appalled by the horrific nature of it, and also the fact that nothing really was said. And I thought, no, people need to know this. People need to know about this little girl and the life that she had. From what I know, she was the most kind-hearted little girl that you would ever be pleased to meet. When she was very young, her godmother, who I know personally, had a challenging day or whatever might have happened, and she was on the couch and was clearly distressed. And Kayla, with a bottle in her mouth, came crawling over, climbed up on the couch, and they hugged, almost as if Kayla knew something was wrong before she could really understand or speak. And from what I understand, they fell asleep on the couch there, comforting each other. And when Kayla was old enough to attend school, as I said before, her family didn't have a great deal of wealth or prestige, but Kayla would give what money she had and what resources she had to help her fellow students. She had such a giving and kind heart. And the thing I find sad is, as you've mentioned before, I do live in Australia. We're surrounded by beautiful beaches, coastline that's second to none in the world. In April of 2016, Kenny and Marie were going to take Kayla to the beach for the first time. She never saw the beach, she never saw the ocean, and she never had the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I want to say something about this for a moment. Thank you, Mike, for sharing that from the heart. There's no media coverage, and that's why Mike began this page, of course. And Kayla's story and Kayla's family's story is just one of many. Mike has shared with us a document from a non-government organization in South Africa. We'll post images of this on the Twitter feeds, our social media feeds after this, about even just now in the month of January 2019, the collation, a collection of the attacks so far, some of them resulting in murders. So this is an ongoing thing. But we have to remember, this is about showing you slices of life and who controls the narrative and the nature of power and the nature, as Jason said, of people being able to rally around something. In an alternate universe, this would be a whole hour-long package on a news show, on a nightly news show, on 60 Minutes or Nightline, or maybe even a movie would be made about it. As I joke about sometimes, I call it Vol Hollywood instead of Hollywood in an alternate reality. There'd be movies made about this. There would be women crying in the streets, holding up signs. There would be GoFundMe accounts. But we don't see this in the mainstream. And it's not because these stories don't exist. It's because the narrative, the slice that you're shown, that you're manipulated into, is it's the intention of people that don't want you to know about this, that want to take your heritage from you, that want to take your self-confidence from you, and that don't want you to have something to rally around. But that is why we are creating all of this alternative media. That is why we are connecting with people around the world. And that is why good men like Mike are doing his part. In his case, one of the things, of course, is this memorial page. And as he said, he's doing writing about Kayla and her family, because we need to take the power of narrative back. We need to take the power of perspective back. Jason.
Yeah, I'm just going to read 2 super chats really quick that have come in since throwing it back to you all. I'm going to speak very little for the rest of the show, aside from saying this and reading super chats. And that's because we have to tap out at the top of the hour, folks. There's no time. We can't do overdrive today. We have some scheduling issues, Jared and I. So we will be tapping out at the top of the hour. We will have Mike back, though, but we're going to have him share as much of his information as he can between now and that point. Really quick, I will read the super chats, and then I'll get to the one brief point I want to make. Looks like we have a $5 super chat from Mayanable. Will let Islam destroy the left? For us. And then, good question. And we have a casual cruising with super chatting with 20 Swedish krona. Plastic particles in our water decreases T levels. Indeed, if you haven't looked up before the number of plastic particles found in your water bottles, You will be stunned. So, having said that, we have a lot of people, and this is an important thing because people want to know what to do. What can they do? How can they be a hero for our people? How can they stop more Kaylas from happening? Well, you want to know how? You look to that hero right there on your screen, traditional Mike. That is what a hero looks like today. She speaks beyond her grave because of that man. She speaks to millions, and they will speak to millions because of that man. Her voice wasn't snuffed out. Her body might have been taken, but this hero speaks for her and she to the rest of us. And what will that do? You think that won't have power? If you doubt it for 1 second, there is no piece of hardware that you can find on planet Earth that will wield more power than the voices of our slain come to life again by heroes like Traditional Mike. That is where the real hero is today. He will save countless numbers of our people, while other ideas will do nothing but sit idle. So if you want an example, it's Mike right here. And if you want to help that cause, if you want to magnify Kayla's little voice from the grave, then you get on his Twitter. You retweet the things that he says. You pick a victim and you sponsor that victim's voice on into eternity by way of your social media. The stories are horrific. These are the stories that will reach the ears of our white brothers and sisters at every rung in our civilization. And that will undermine the anti-white power structure. So having said that, I will stay on top of the super chats, but otherwise give it to Jared and the questions and have Mike share as much of the information as we can get from him.
Well, Mike, I know it's difficult to talk about. I don't know if you were done talking about Kayla. Certainly, please do share any more you'd like to. If not, I think this is a good time to transition into some general patterns about what's going on in South Africa and related to the rest of the European world, because there still may be some people that say, all right, look, there's horrible things going on, but there are bad people everywhere. They still might not connect it to wider patterns. So I'd like to get into that. But first, do you have anything more to say about Kayla?
I think the important thing to remember is with Kayla's case or with anyone else is that, as Jason pointed out, and rightfully so, you know, these people aren't. Every month we see, as you've pointed out, Jared, we have the numbers. We have, you know, X number of attack victims, X number of murder victims. These people aren't numbers. These people aren't numbers to me. These people are people. They are real people who just want to go about their normal daily lives, the same as you or I or anyone viewing this stream. And they have the right to do that, the same as we do, regardless of whether of the country that you live in. You have the right to live your life as you need to. And, you know, Kayla was a real person. John Bozeman, who was a farm victim, murder victim from last year, is a real person. Johan Higginus, who is a very famous case from 2016 as well, who was shot in front of his own daughter and his wife, is a real person. These are real people. We need to, as Jason said, find the story that connects with us. And I've had people ask me, why this story? Why this 9-year-old girl? And I honestly cannot answer. There's just something in this story that has resonated with deep within my spirit and my soul, and I just have run with it. And I'm very thankful I found it, because even if I reach 5 people with this story, more than there was before, then I have done what I want to do. I mean, obviously I would like to reach as many as I can, but if I can reach one more person today, one more person tomorrow, then it does honor to Kayla's memory and Marie's memory and Monty and Kenneth and the entire family. And when I did all the work that I did, Kayla's godmother said, "Thank you so much for what you do. We thought we were alone. We didn't think anyone knew about this. And it has brought such relief to the extended family of Kayla and her mum, especially, to know that I'm here." And that's what we can do from the outside, is we can provide a crutch, a support structure for these extended families and those who survive these attacks, that they know that we are here for them outside of South Africa. I have people contact me and say, we're so thankful you're there. We know you're doing your best. Thank you very much for what you do. And that's what makes the difference. We may not be able to fly in there and just pull them all out and bring them to America or Australia for safety, but we can give them comfort. And that is perhaps one of the greatest things we can do.
Hear, hear. Well, as I was saying, why don't we connect some dots now more for the audience and talk about what it is about South Africa. If you can paint a little bit of a picture about the white history there and what has led to this moment and patterns that exist there that we also see echoed in all the Western world. So we can take some warning from this. And I think that will motivate people, because to be frank, as is human nature, I think that there are sensitive souls like you out there who respond to stories like this. But let's face it, more people are going to perk up their ears if they understand that this is a warning, this is a pattern that is going to happen in other places as well. So why don't we start with a little bit just about South Africa, and then we could talk about the wider Western world. I had some thoughts on that, but I'd like to get all of yours first.
Yes, thank you, Jared. The whites, well, South Africa obviously is sort of two different, I guess, groups of white people there. I mean, obviously you've got the Boer people, who obviously are of Dutch descent, who came in the 1600s. They arrived on the Cape, down near Cape Town, which is a point for another stream, perhaps. There's some activity happening down in Cape Town area, which is relevant to what we're discussing. And then, of course, you have the English-speaking populace when the British came and colonized South Africa as well. So, and obviously we had some of these people who are living on these farms in South Africa have been there for that many years. It's intergenerational farming. They have had this land for so long that their government is now trying to take off them. They have worked this land. They are excellent farmers. And what I don't think a lot of people don't fathom is, without your farmers, you have no food. You have no lifeblood in your country. So if you wipe out your farmers, if you wipe out the Afrikaners who are farming, or you push them to Australia, to America, to Russia, we're talking about taking 15,000 of these people last year. I don't know how that endeavor is progressing. You cripple your country, literally. Without food, your country cannot survive. And there's a lot of things going on in the background in South Africa with the government and with certain political parties who are actively working against the white people. They are saying that, we have to fight against the whites, and et cetera, et cetera. They are encouraging people to take up arms against the farmers. Effectively, without directly doing so, they are encouraging the farm attacks and the farm murders. And it's called, as people, and I would encourage people to go and watch Farmlands by Lauren Southern, which we haven't had time to mention on this stream yet. She shows so much about what the white people are having to do for themselves there, because they don't have the support of the government to back themselves. They have to look after each other. They have, two-way radios. They have networks amongst the local farmers, and they are coordinating and networking their own defense strategies, because they are trying to survive. And the thing that's important to remember is, when we come into the other parts of Western civilization, like Australia, America, Europe, there is a push on immigration in these countries. We don't have it quite so bad down here because we are blessed to be on a massively large island with lots of desert. But we have we have had problems with immigration in the past, and the white population in Australia is on the decline. In fact, as a matter of accuracy, the Australian Bureau of Statistics last year released a figure which said that the rate of immigration in this country that I am living in outweighed our birth rate for the first time last year. And we have an aging population in Australia. A lot of our population is quite old. So which leads to other things with religion and our cultural identity as Australians is being radically changed down here as we move forward. And we have to be very careful because we can't lose the essence of what makes us Aussies, because we're a very patriotic country, but we have a very strong kinship with each other as Western people in Australia. You've probably heard of things like mateship and statements like that. You will look after our mates, and that's certainly very true. And if you have these rogue elements come into England or France or Germany, Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand, it will change things, and it may not happen as fast in our countries as it is happening in South Africa, because the dynamic is different by the way the countries are set up, and the governmental structures are different. But it's a slippery slope that we could very easily find ourselves sliding down before we know it. And if we don't keep an eye on it and keep it under check, then 20, 30 years down the track, whatever it might be, we might find ourselves on dire straits and end up being in a similar situation to what's happened in Rhodesia in South Africa. Not identical, obviously, but it would be unique to each country. But it is a real and clear and present danger that we face.
Yeah, something that we need to keep in mind is that even in Europe, as we've seen over the last couple of years, it doesn't matter in that case if there's a narrative of, well, white Europeans have been on that continent and it's the home base. There will be stories like we saw out of the UK with Cheddar Man, where they were saying that there's always been people of darker persuasions on the European continent. Whatever narratives I was saying before about narratives, whatever narrative fits the agenda to undermine Westerners and Western civilization, that is what will be used. There'll be all kinds of backflips and justifications. Of course, if we were using the opposition's morality in an even-handed way, then you could say, even if there are complexities about colonization and the fact that there are white populations scattered around these places around the world because of trade and the Dutch East India Company and all kinds of things, the fact of the matter is these people are here now. People like yourself, white Australians, are in Australia now. That wouldn't, if you were trying to have them be consistent under their morality, that wouldn't be justification for undermining a population, for having them, as you were saying, have their birth rates drop and their way of life go away and have all kinds of political and actual violence against them. But that's not the case. As Jason often says, if going north today hurts the white population and going south tomorrow hurts the white population, then the powers that be and the people that run the narratives, they'll go north today and they'll go south tomorrow. You can't look for any kind of an ideological or moral consistency. Here's the big picture as I understand it. And again, I definitely encourage people to go look at the Boer Republic interview with Millennial Woes. Those guys are great. Jason and I spoke to them when we were on Tutar in October. But essentially, you get a good overview. And this is what I picked up from them. And please, Jason or Mike, fill me in if you have anything to add to this. But essentially, they had this whole Rainbow Nation concept. It turned out to be, as we see over the last couple of decades, a failed experiment. Now, South Africa had been built up by the Dutch, English, and some other populations, German and Slavic, Scottish, I believe, too. Boer Republic was saying, but a bunch of different white Western populations there had built it up, the infrastructure, the farming, into essentially a first world nation right down there on the tip of the African continent. When the first settlers arrived there in the early 1600s, they went to areas where there were no tribes. And yes, there were eventually conflicts when they came across these peoples, but for the most part, they began the farmlands and they began cultivating that land where there weren't any tribes. The tribes came later. Because of all the innovation, because of all the infrastructure over the centuries, you had, as I said, a first world nation at its peak a couple of decades ago. And then in 1994, they kind of gave it away with the Nelson Mandela era coming in. Even so, I remember following a little bit of the 2010 World Cup, and it was probably the only sub-Saharan nation that had the infrastructure to support something like hosting the soccer World Cup. Even though, as I was following that story a little bit at the time, it was a little hairy. They were almost missing some deadlines, and it was not quite as smooth as hosting the World Cup in a first world population, a first world country, but they did pull it off. But essentially, over the course of the 20th century, the African population there in South Africa grew 800%. Okay, so that doesn't sound exactly like a people who are being oppressed or on the wane the way that we are. Look at what Mike just said about the declining Australian white population. We have the same thing going on here in the United States. The basic thing is the whites will innovate. They will build the infrastructure. They had their own distinct places. You had a multi-ethnic state. So they had a certain amount of separation. And this was presented, again, in the media, in the narrative, as apartheid, as this evil thing. And even without the world trading with South Africa for some of the past decades in the late 20th century, there was still an amazing amount of innovations, even though they were cut off from trade, because the evils of apartheid. It might be easy for self-professed liberals and progressives to look on apartheid South Africa and say, oh my God, it's like modern day segregation. How backwards can you be? But this was their way. You have to hear it from their own mouth, their way of dealing with the fact that they had separate populations that had separate ways of life, and they had their discrete areas. The whites built up their cities. Other populations, the African populations, would come in and want to benefit from that. And that's where you got some of the separation, white areas, black areas. But then eventually, because of all kinds of progressive pressures, and we know there's a lot of communist party action going on there and a lot of agitation, to make the long story short, again, in the early 1990s, they gave this up. So we see the same pattern of the white innovation, white building it up. The other populations want to benefit from that. And even, as Mike said, at 8% of the population, they're still taxed the most. So they're giving into the system with the taxes, giving the most of the system with the taxes. They're producing the most food with the farmlands, and yet they're over a barrel in terms of their population now, in terms of the violence against them. Now, I was in Kreuzberg, a district of Berlin, a few years ago, and it's the Turkish district. And this was a red pill moment for me because I didn't know much about Germany at the time. I didn't know much about the situation in Europe at the time. It was a little before the refugee crisis kicked in a full gear. But I remember visiting Kreuzberg in Berlin and seeing the same things I see in American cities with Hispanic populations here. The same kind of interactions, the same kind of, the Germans being guilty, the Turkish people being on government programs, getting the handouts, benefiting from the productivity of the native German population. And I went back home with a lot to think about because, same pattern here, only, it's the Turkish people in Germany. Here in the States, it's Hispanic people from Central and South America in the States. And then you start to hear about situations in South Africa. And then you start to hear about, as Mike's explaining, the situation in Australia. The pattern is the same everywhere. And at some point, we have to rally around who we are and what is in our best interest. Sometimes there's a time and a place not to be super universalistic about your morality and say, you know what, I wish other people well, but I have to protect my kind, my family, my civilization, my people in this case. And we have to do what is good for us. We, in our circles, we're starting to see this question posed more. What is good for the Europeans? Period. That needs to be a rallying cry. That needs to be the focal point of a lot of the ways that we are asking and answering questions around society and politics.
Very well said. Let me jump through these super chats real quick, and then we'll get Mike's thoughts on this. England 14 super chatting with £5, writing nothing but thank you very much for the investment, good sir. Lama Dirk donated $10. It is okay to feel more of a connection to the Kayla tragedy than, say, a black child gunned down in Chicago. Don't feel ashamed if you root for the white guy in boxing or MMA. Society wants us to feel bad for the connection, but it is natural. And more importantly, it's natural, it's spiritual, it is what every other group does for their groups, and it is long past time that we do this for our people. And the important element to that is that we realize that our personal well-being is only achievable by way of our group's well-being. Understand that, and we won't have another problem across the globe. Simon JJ super chatting with £20, writes nothing, but we most kindly welcome that investment. Thank you very much, Simon. Jeffro Bodine super chatting with $2. Thank you for your work. Well, thank you, sir, for being a part of this growing, rapidly growing community. Machiavellius Sucks donated $1.99 through Super Chat and writes, should white people leave South Africa? Well, that's a personal question for many of them. I think that the question of whether or not the country is too far gone or can be saved or what have you, or what individual family, what their scenario is, will determine whether or not they should flee from the scenario. I'm not on the ground, and we are in no way able, because we don't have sufficient information, to make any sort of advice. But certainly when it comes down to what we have taken, what we have created, what we have built into Western civilization, we will take it all back, every square inch of it, once we regain our destiny. So I'll throw it back to Mike and Jared.
Yes, I do want to add that us nice white people in South Africa also set up these clinics in the white areas, and that helped a lot of the black population as well with our healthcare. So we're very nice, and then it comes back to bite us in the ass, to put it in plain, blunt language. But Mike, while you're here, and while we still have some more time on the show, you've spoken about the United South Africa Coalition. This is an organization that's collating voices inside and outside South Africa about what's going on there. So if you could please speak a little about them.
Certainly. USAC, or the United South Africa Coalition, as you have just pointed out, Jared, is collating witness statements primarily of people who have been attacked, wronged, or families thereof, obviously, in case of victims, of all the different experiences of those who have been affected by what's happening in South Africa, both obviously internally and those who obviously have left the country. They have believe that they are still working on that. I'm only very fringely involved in that organization, as I already have a lot on the plate, obviously, and don't want to overstretch myself too much. But I am aware of the work that they're doing, and I believe that they're also using that information when they have finished collating it to take that to officials, government officials, American government officials. I think Congress is what it's called, and to raise the point of saying this is what is happening there. We need to action some kind of help. So they are a unifying voice for the various different small voices of all the different things that are going on in this multifaceted problem that's facing the white people in South Africa.
Right. Our very professional, very astute moderator, Syrup, has put their link in the chat. From what I saw on their website, they're also helping people to apply for visa status in other countries. Although to the super chat before, I think a lot of the people in South Africa feel that they have been there for some of their families for hundreds and hundreds of years and have built that land. And there's a feeling like this is my land and I'm going to make a stake on that. I can understand that. But not for us to judge. We're not in that situation. It's a very complex situation. For those who do feel they want out, there is a visa application program on that website. And I know there's also a petition to get more governments around the world to recognize this as a genocide. So speaking of that, Mike, if you could tell us a little more about the land grabbing that's going on now. We're hearing more and more about this. And, the South African government seems to be playing footsie with this idea of grabbing the land. Oh, we're not going to do it. Now we're going to do it. And sending mixed messages. If you can tell us what the latest news is on that.
Yes, that issue has been kicked around like a football for quite a while by the South African government. Earlier last year, I became aware of it and wrote a couple of articles for Ayla's website. They effectively are tossing up the idea. Actually, they're putting legislation in place, or attempting to, which will allow them to simply go and seize land from the white farmers without compensating them for their land. Obviously, if you would go to get a piece of land off someone, you'd pay them for it. It's quite a normal thing. But they are trying to take this land off the farmers. And the interesting thing I find is that when you look into the issue a little bit further, they're not after all of the land, as one would think. They're only after land in certain areas which appear to be high in mineral resources, according to what I have seen a couple of reports on. But this land issue has been smouldering for a while. They have been talking about redistributing the land more, quote, fairly for some time. And then what is the case is that they go and get the land, and instead of a lot of the people who the land is being obtained for, they don't want the land, they want the cash. They want the money as a result of that land being acquired from the government. So they're not interested in farming the land. They just want the end result of the funding that comes from the land, which again puts the country under more stress because you're taking perfectly good farmland, which is being currently cultivated by excellent farmers who have been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years in some cases, as you've pointed out, and the land is being wasted, and crops aren't going to be on that land, and there's going to be a food crisis. And then what's the South African government going to do then? Turn to the international community and go help? I would also like to briefly touch on a point the South African president did make a comment when in America last year that there are no farm attacks and no murders happening in the country at all. He blatantly denied, and this was after President Trump tweeted that he had instructed Secretary Pompeo to look into the issue, and President Ramaphosa went, there is no issue here. There is no land grab. There is no murders. There are no attacks. He publicly said that. I think it might have been on Bloomberg, but I'm not 100% sure which outlet it was.
Speaking of the recognition of genocide and the question of refugee status, what is the tone like in your home country of Australia? I know there have been some politicians that are more amenable to the plight of the white South Africans.
Yes. Earlier last year, as I pointed out earlier, and you are quite correct, there was a push by the Home Affairs and Immigration Minister at the time, Mr. Peter Dutton, to put in place special visas to assist anyone who would like to leave South Africa to come to Australia. This did get some notoriety with some other members of the Australian Parliament on the right, the Conservative side, the right-hand side, primarily from the Liberal Party, which is Minister Dutton's party. This actually led to a groundswell of support from the Australian people to a degree. There were several rallies organised across the country, in Brisbane, Melbourne, here in Perth. For the white farmers, a group called South SA Events helped put those events on, and we actually had the highest attendance of the rallies here in Perth. We had, I think, about 3,500 people marching through our CBD for that cause. I actually did take quite a bit of footage on that. I need to get it up onto my new YouTube that you guys have got in the link there in the description. I actually also wrote to Minister Dutton around that time, giving my support to what he was doing. Unfortunately, I have to inform people that the issue sort of got put on the back burner. Other things sort of took the attention of the Australian media. Minister Dutton is still very heavily active in supporting that, as is Minister Hastie, Andrew Hastie, and several state MPs here in Western Australia, and to push that cause. But as with Australian politics, as it tends to happen, we had yet another Prime Minister change last year. It's terrible over here. We change Prime Ministers almost as often as I have dinner. And so it took the attention away from the issue, but we will continue to push it in Australia to attempt to assist the people in South Africa as much as we can.
Yeah, I see there was a rally in Perth that garnered 3,000 people back in April of 2018.
Yes, that's correct. I was in attendance at that rally.
Yeah, that was the rally. Is that the one you have footage on?
Yes, it is. I took footage of the speeches via the various dignitaries and some footage of the rally as well. So I'll get that online again and make that available to our viewers.
Very nice. And also, I'd like to point out to the audience that our guest here, Mike, he wrote a template for other Australians to write in to Peter Dutton, their Minister for Home Affairs, Immigration and Border Protection, about this issue of getting South Africans refugee status. Although, as he said, things have been a little all over the place in Australian politics. Mike, bit of a challenging question. I wouldn't know how to approach it myself, to tell you the truth, but just to get it out there, do you have any thoughts on the complexities of refugee status for white South Africans? Because on the one hand, people like us, people in this chat, we want to do everything we can to help them. On the other hand, we know that politics being what it is and the current state of affairs being what they are, it's going to open up a floodgate where all these Western countries would say, hey, well, if you're taking those South African refugees, then come on, another 10 billion people from the third world of all Africa and South America, come on in, because God knows we couldn't just focus on one country, one white population in particular. Yes,
it certainly would act as a Pandora's box. Yes, it is important to help the people in South Africa, and people in this chat, and as you said, all three of us here on this video stream want to do as much as we can. But as you said, politics sort of is a very complex dynamic. In terms of immigration, as I pointed out earlier, the immigration rate in Australia outweighed our birth rate. The Australian population as a whole is growing at such an exponential rate now. We hit 20, and I know it's only a small number compared to what the American population is, but we hit 25 million people last year, which occurred about 25 or 30 years ahead of projections that were made about 10 or 15 years ago. So, and a lot of that comes from immigration. Not that I'm saying obviously immigration is necessarily a bad thing, but it has to be a very delicate matter, because on the one hand we need to help these people in South Africa, but you know, the left and all these other groups are going to start jumping up and down and going, you know, well, what about these people or those people, or these people have a plight? And each case obviously is unique in terms of and each population's situation is unique, but we have to make sure that the narrative in South Africa doesn't get overwhelmed and doesn't get swamped by the equally other important issues of other refugees from other parts of the world. Yes, there are people in other parts of the world who are legitimately persecuted or being attacked, undermined. But if you look at South Africa, as we've said before, these people are only about 8% of the population. They have been crying out for help. Some of them want to leave the country. Some of them want to stay. I know people in both camps. Some want to stay in South Africa. Some want to leave. Some with young families want to move away and have a better life for their kids than what they can have there. I know some people who haven't had kids. They're married and don't have children because they don't want to bring a child into that country because they feel it's morally wrong. In fact, that's Kayla's godparents. Kayla was basically like their daughter because they actually helped raise her because her mother worked 7 days a week just to try and make ends meet. So they raised Kayla as their own daughter. But we need to continue to push onto our governments in America, Britain, Australia to keep this issue of what's happening in South Africa in their focus, in their eyes, because they'll get distracted by something else, be it a domestic political problem or another international situation. And we have to make sure that the issue sits forefront in their mind by putting out tweets, doing interviews like what we're doing now, making noise on social media, getting things out there. Lauren has done some fantastic work. Katie Hopkins has also done a lot of excellent work with South Africa. Lauren was actually in Australia about 7 months ago doing a tour with Stefan Molyneux, and that garnered a lot of attention for her documentary because she spoke quite heavily about it on the tour. I was unable to attend due to other commitments, but I did see some footage, and she actually had someone at her Melbourne rally stand up and say, "I'm from South Africa. My uncle or brother, it might have been, was killed in an attack, and I just wanted to get up and thank you for everything you've done." And then he asked a quick question and he sat down. This is the kind of impact that we are having, yourself, Jared, Jason, me, anyone else who's speaking out for these people. We are making an impact on the lives of those who feel as though there is no help and support from the international community because there's so many other issues going on. One little issue in South Africa doesn't get the media attention, like the case with Kayla's story. We have to keep it in the public consciousness as much as we can.
And as I said, I think the key to that is connecting the dots and showing people the patterns that are happening in all Western nations. This pattern of white development and then, use them as tax cattle and keep them down, but we want their money. This is what's going on everywhere. Also, I'd like to quickly point out another documentary. I haven't seen it, but it is on my list, and I hear very good things about it. And that would be The Boer Project by Jonas Nielsen from Sweden, a friend of the Golden Ones. You may have seen that out there. I did see Lauren Southern's work, very well put together, and Boer Project by Jonas Nielsen is on my list as well. So another thing to check out.
Yeah, I am aware of Jonas and his work. I'm connected very remotely with him through his fiance, who is actually a farm attack survivor that I have spoken to quite extensively over the past year or so. So I am aware of that one, and again, that is another good documentary. I have seen it, and I would recommend it to our viewers.
Well, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and speaking with us and letting us know what's going on. We will absolutely have you back. Regrettably, it is time for us to tap out since we don't have time to go into overdrive, which we would like to do. But what I would like to do quickly is get final thoughts and what you all are working on next and working on currently and where people can find you moving forward. And we will begin with our heroic guest, Traditional Mike.
Thank you, Jason. As mentioned before, I'm currently putting together a collection of my experiences and Kayla's life story, not just the story of her murder, but her entire life, to give a complete picture as to who this little girl was. It is my hope to turn that into a book. I already have a South African-based author who is helping me on that project, helping me edit it, because I'm by no means an author. I'm just a guy who tries to help out as much as he can with these things. So that's what I'm basically working on at the moment. And my social media is obviously provided by my kind hosts in the description of this. Please feel free to follow me. My YouTube is somewhat deficient at the moment. I am trying to work on that. Twitter is my primary outlet that I normally use to move the work forward. And I would like to quickly add my gratitude to both Jason and Jared for their gracious invitation to come on to TAP today. It's been a great pleasure to be with you guys. You are wonderful people for our cause and our people and white well-being. And I would be honored deeply if you guys would ever have me back on the program. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Jared, please go ahead.
It's been our honor and pleasure. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, as Jason said, about the work and dedication you've put in. I've seen the response from the chat. A lot of people are very moved, and I'm sure we'll be checking out your work and sharing your work if they haven't been doing so already. It's Traditional Mike on most of the social media that you're familiar with. Of course, the links will be in the description of this video on the recording. So for me, as you all hopefully know, it all goes through thegreatorder.com. My website is the hub for everything that I do, archives of videos of this show. I've been getting back into the habit of actually taking some clips from this show, from TAP, often under 10 minutes. So that might be a good thing for you guys to get little snippets of, and especially send to new people who might not be familiar with us. You know, it's a lot to ask if you send someone a 2.5 hour long stream and say, check out this video. But it's a little more understandable, a little easier of an ask if you send them a 10-minute clip, and maybe that 10-minute clip will pique their interest and they'll want to see more what those two crazy guys, Jared and Jason, are about. Other things on the site, poems, articles, t-shirts, ways to support. I recently did a video on a very different topic, but speaking to the male-female dynamic, something we want to continue to speak about more as well, called Don't Send Nudes. So that's a video with a controversial title that I just put up yesterday, just 1 minute and 11 seconds long, speaking of short videos. But well, there'll be more. There's so much more to do. We're just getting started in this exciting year of 2019. But Jason, thank you for your platform. Thank you for all that you do. Mike, same. Thank you for getting up early over there in Australia to be with us. And we look forward to staying in touch with you and seeing where all of your great work takes you. God bless with everything that you're doing.
Amen. I underscore that. Absolutely. Folks, if you have not, absolutely, as soon as we're done here, jump on over to these two great men's channels, their different platforms that they're on, subscribe to them, support them financially. We are doing the yeoman's work. We are growing this community. You all are fantastic members, valuable members of what we're doing. And we need your support to continue growing, which I will repeat yet again is just absolutely colossal. The rate of growth, the rate of messages that I have received over the past 2 weeks, which doubled the previous rate and then doubled again these past 2 days. I have received so many messages. I will get back with all of you. I value every single one of you. Even if it takes several days, I will be sure to get back with all of you. So please make sure to subscribe to their work, financially support them. I also want to salute and spotlight a few people I saw in the chat, as well as thank all of our super chatters, everyone who participated with great thoughts and questions in the chat. We deeply appreciate everything that you have done. We deeply appreciate your support, whether it's with your time, your talents, and your cash. All of it is very meaningful to us. All of it goes into the work of making sure this machine for white well-being continues to grow, continues to get stronger, so that that day will come when we do have that entity for our people to rally around. So there won't be another Kayla. There won't be people out there, whites out there, fighting by themselves individually and being subsumed and consumed by the anti-white opposition. So I saw in the super chat, or in the chat today, I saw alt-right Serbia. I saw Megiddo. I saw Straight White Alpha. Saw DM. Big salute to you as well. Yufa, I saw in there. Charles Wood, I saw in there as well. I want to thank our moderators. I saw Syrup today. Sedinsky Lawson, Dainty Brighton. I really want to give a big thanks to Jared, who does the lion's share of making sure that these TAP episodes are entertaining and informative and exciting for you all. It is what he does for us is something that is beyond thanks. So thank you very much, Jared. And the last thing I will leave you all with is this thought. If only a fraction of our race becomes a people, we won't have to throw a stone to be able to take back our destiny. Thank you all for being here, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.